Good morning, bright learners. Okay, today we are going to be reading chapter 5 of the Boxcar Children. This chapter in my book is called Housekeeping. All right, are you ready? Me too. The next morning, Jess was up before the others, as was fitting for a little housekeeper. That is, she was first if we accept the dog, who had opened one eye instantly every time his little mistress stirred in her sleep. He sat watching gravely from the door of the car as Jess descended to get breakfast. She walked from the little waterfall quite a distance down the brook, looking at it with critical eyes. This will be the well, she said to herself, regarding a small but deep and quiet basin just below the falls. Below that she found a larger basin, lined with gravel with flat stones surrounding it. This will be the wash tub, she decided. And now I must go back to the refrigerator. This was the strangest spot of all, for behind the little waterfall was a small, quiet pool in which Jessie had set the milk bottles the night before. Not a drop of water could get in, but all night long the cool, running water had surrounded the bottles. They were now fairly icy to the touch. Jessie smiled as she drew them out. "Is it good?" asked Benny's voice. There he sat in the door of the car, swinging his legs, his arms around the shaggy dog. "It's delicious," declared Jessie, "cold as ice." She climbed up beside him as she spoke, bringing the breakfast with her. The other two children sat up and looked at it. "Today, Jessie," began Henry, "I will go back to town and try to get a job, mowing lawns or something. Then we can afford to have something besides milk for breakfast." Milk suited Benny very well, however, so the older children allowed him to drink rather more than his share. Henry did not waste any time talking. He brushed his hair as well as he could without a brush, rolled down his sleeves, and started for town with the $2. "Glad you've got a dog, Jessie," he called back as he waved his straw hat. The children watched him disappear around the curve and then turned towards Jessie expectantly. They were not mistaken. Jessie had a plan. "We'll explore," she began mysteriously. "We'll begin here at the car and hunt all over these woods until we find a dump." "What's a dump?" inquired Benny. "Oh, Benny," answered Violet, "you know what a dump is. All old bottles and papers and broken dishes." "And wheels?" asked Benny interestedly. "Will there be any old wheels?" "Yes, maybe," assented Violet. "But cups, Benny. Think of drinking milk out of a cup again." "Oh, yes," said Benny politely, but it was clear that his mind was centered on wheels rather than cups. The exploring party started, slowly down the rusty track, with the dog hopping happily on 3 legs. The fourth paw, nicely bandaged with Jessie's handkerchief, he held up out of harm's way. "I think this is a spur track," said Jessie. "They built it in here so they could load wood on the cars, and then when they had cut all the wood, they didn't need the track anymore." This explanation seemed very likely, for here and there were stumps of trees and decaying chips. Violet took note of these wood chips and remembered them some days later. In fact, both girls kept their eyes open and pointed out things of interest to each other. "Remember these logs, Violet, if we should never need any," said Jessie, pointing. "Blackberry blossoms," returned Violet briefly, turning one over gently with her foot. "Big flat stones," remarked Jessie later on as they came upon a great heap of them. Here the track came out into the open sunshine, and broken pieces of rail showed clearly where it had joined the main track at some time in the past. And here, from the top of the wooded hill, the children could plainly see the city in the valley. They walked along the track, picking out a church steeple here and there, forgetting for a moment the object of their search. "There's a wheel!" cried Benny, triumphantly from behind them. The girls looked down, and with a glad cry of surprise, Jessie recognized a dump at the foot of the hill. They found it not composed entirely of ashes and tin cans either, although both of these were there in great profusion. It was a royal dump containing both wheels and cups. "Oh, Benny," cried Jessie, "if it hadn't been for you!" She hugged him, wheel and all, and began turning over the rubbish with great delight. "Here's a white pitcher, Jessie," Violet called, holding up a perfect specimen with a tiny chip in its nose. "Here's a big white cup," said Jessie delightedly, laying it aside. "Want a teapot, Jessie?" inquired Benny, offering her an enormous blue enameled affair without a handle. "Yes, indeed," cried Jessie, "and we can use that for water. I found 2 cups and a bowl already. And Violet, we ought to be looking for spoons, too." Violet pointed without speaking to her little pile of treasures. There were 5 iron spoons covered with rust. "Wonderful," pronounced Jessie with rapture. Indeed, it is very doubtful if collectors of rare and beautiful bits of porcelain ever enjoyed a search as much as did these adventurers in the dump heap. Benny actually found 4 wheels, exactly alike, probably from the same cart, and insisted upon carrying them back. To please him, Jessie allowed him to add them to the growing pile. "Here's a big iron kettle," observed Violet, "but we won't really cook with a fire, will we, Jessie?" "We'll take it back, though," replied Jessie with a knowing look. "We can pile lots of dishes in it." They could, and did, but not until after Benny had discovered his beloved pink cup. It was a tea party cup, kind of like this one, my tea party cup, of bright rose color, with a wreath of gorgeous roses on it, and a little shepherdess giving her lamb a drink from a pale blue brook. It had a perfectly good handle, gold into the bargain. Its only flaw was a dangerous crack running through the lamb's nose and front feet. Jessie made a cushion for it out of grass and laid it on top of the kettle full of treasures. All the things, even the wheels, were laid on a wide board which the 2 girls carried between them. All right, next time we'll read chapter 6. Oh, no, we're not done. We're not finished. Yes. Okay, keep going. Can you imagine the dishwashing when the gay party returned to the freight car? Children do not usually care for dishwashing, but never did a little boy handle dishes to his sister so carefully as Benny did. On their hands and knees, beside the clear, cool little wash tub, the 3 children soaped and rinsed and dried their precious store of dishes. Jessie scoured the rust from the spoons with sand. "There," she said, drawing the last polished spoon. The children sat back and looked admiringly at their own handiwork. But they did not look long. There was too much to be done. "Jessie," exclaimed Violet, "I'll tell you." Violet seldom spoke so excitedly. Even Benny turned around and looked at her. "Come and see what I noticed in the car last night." Both children followed her and peered in at the door. "See, on the wall, right over on the other door, Jessie." Now, all Jessie could see were 2 thick chunks of wood nailed securely to the closed door opposite, the open one. But she whirled around and around as fast as she could, clapping her hands. When she could get her breath, however, she skipped over to the board they had carried, dusted it nicely, and laid it carefully across the 2 wooden projections. It was a perfect shelf. "There," said Jessie. "All right, let's draw our perfect shelf. It'll be wood, so it's brown. There are these little things coming out of the walls that Violet has noticed. And then they lay their clean, dusted board on top of it. Like this. There's their shelf. Let's get rid of our Bright Learners sign. The children could hardly wait to arrange the shining new dishes on the shelf. Violet quietly gathered some feathery white flowers, a daisy or 2, and some maidenhair ferns, which she arranged in a glass vase filled with water from the well. This she put in the middle with the broken edge hidden. There, said Jessie. You said there 3 times, Jessie, remarked Benny contentedly. So I did, replied Jessie, laughing, but I'm going to say it again. She pointed and said, There. Henry was coming up the path. Now we're finished. Yes. Okay, I'll see you next time for Chapter 6, Earning a Living. Bye.